Warning, this review contains spoilers, so be aware. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is a love letter of a game to all fans of Castlevania and the old NES action platform genre. Not only does it look like Castlevania, it also plays similar to Castlevania. You will even notice some similarities in the level design to Castlevania 1. The game is more similar to Castlevania 3 Curse of Dracula though, as the world map takes inspiration from it, as well as having more than one character traveling with you. This similarity is a good thing, as Castlevania 3 was arguably the best Castlevania game for the NES. Do not fear, however, as Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is not nearby as difficult, nor does it force you to abandon your new characters for another, unlike Castlevania 3. Before starting the game, you have two options between what kind of game style you want. You can read this as difficulty options, as that's what it basically is. You have the choice between casual and veteran. Casual gives you unlimited lives, and when you take damage, there is no knockback, while veteran plays more like classic Castlevania, with a limited amount of lives and knockback in the air. Both game modes does have the stiff jumps though, so if you jump you have to follow through with it. You can switch style whenever you start up the same save file, so you don't have to worry about having to start from the very beginning every time you want to change style. It's good to note that the game does start in Japanese the first time you start it, so you have to manually change the language in the options. The game has been developed by Artplay Incorporated and co-developed by Inti Creates, and serves as a prequel to the Kickstarter game Bloodstained's Ritual of the Night, created by Koji Igarashi. The story of the game is told by a scrolling text once you start up the game. It basically tells you about the protagonist of the game and builds up the world so that the player has some context of what's going on, but more importantly, it builds up our main character, Zangetsu, to give us an idea what he's like. Once the text is done, we get an intro sequence not far from the first level opening to Castlevania. Then the game begins and we are allowed to start controlling Zangetsu. I will go over the game's characters one by one, as well as the levels themselves, beginning with the characters. Zangetsu. The first out of 4 playable characters, the most unique character of the game, as he doesn't play similar to any other Castlevania character. He wields a katana that he uses to strike his enemies with. I'd say he's the character that is built to be good all around, with the fastest attacks. As far as I could discover, he has 3 kind of sub-weapons. His starting sub-weapon, which is a chain and ball that attacks diagonally upwards, whatever he faces. A spell that is thrown diagonally down, which also creates a black hole that damages the enemy over time, as it lingers, and finally a curse that creates a purple aura around the character. I'm not too sure what it does, but I believe it makes it stronger. Personally, my favorite was the shadow spell. Miriam. This is your basic Belmont character, but with a few differences. First of all, she's the only female character of the party. She has a very long reach with her whip, but thanks to the reach, it is a little bit slower. She has a higher jump, which makes it possible for her to reach higher heights. This will also make some jumps a little bit trickier, as she has a higher chance of getting knocked back into a pit or overshoot a jump. She can also slide on the ground, making it easier to dodge certain enemies or attacks. Thanks to her high jump and slide, she can reach certain areas other characters can't. I discovered 4 of her sub-weapons. She starts with a regular dagger that's thrown forward, triple daggers that are thrown diagonally up with a small spread that makes it easier to hit airborne enemies from a distance, a scythe that is thrown forward that comes back just like a boomerang. Lastly, she has an axe that is so heavy she swings it right in front of her. I was never a big fan of this one. I prefer the triple daggers personally, and use the scythe once in a while. Needless to say, she ended up being my favorite characters in the game. You also play as Miriam as the main character of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Alfred. Alfred is a frail character and the weakest of them all. He's an alchemist, so he relies a lot more on his sub-weapons than any other character. His main weapon is a rod that has a very short reach and doesn't do a lot of damage. I opted out of using him very much until I discovered his starting sub-weapon is super broken. Alfred relies on his alchemy in order to reach different pathways others can't. Let's go over his sub-weapons then, shall we? I discovered 4 of them. First up is the Fire Shield, his starting sub-weapon and my favorite out of them. It creates a barrier of fire around you, destroying enemy projectiles and even turning you invisible against certain hazards. Not only that, but it also damages whatever it touches, so I started using it against the bosses. Then there is his ultimate alchemy, which creates orbs of lightning that targets enemies and home in on them several times before disappearing. Then there's an ice spear that shoots ice. This can be used to freeze lava or burning enemies, making it possible to traverse through them. Last, he had the ability to create a clone of himself that stayed in front of him, making it possible to attack from a distance. Gibble. There's no denying it. Gabble plays like Alucard from Castlevania 3. He attacks using bats that travel in a short upwards arc. His attack is being used to hit enemies that are above you, making him rather useful. Not only that, he can also turn into a bat that he can use to reach platforms and areas that are outside of Miriam's reach. You can also use his bat form to travel over huge pits, as well as reaching items and candlelights, inaccessible for other characters. He can also rush forward in the bat form. Gabble is the only character that doesn't have a sub-weapon, as the bat form is his special ability. He was also fun to play, as making my character go too often. Now, onto the levels themselves. All levels have different pathways that can only be reached with certain characters. And if you want to reach the shortest way to the boss, as well as finding the stage upgrades, you better get to recruiting the characters. One thing that is great to mention is that all characters has their own health bars, so you can make things easier for you by switching characters, preventing them from dying. This makes bosses a lot easier as you keep going in the fight. If one of your characters were to die, it's back to the last room, and if this happens during a boss fight, you have to start over in the boss fight. The character that has died stay dead until you beat a level or all of your characters die, resulting with you losing 1 life. This will also put you back at the last checkpoint. You can switch characters you play, which adds a lot of replayability to the game. As for the character upgrades you can find in the levels, they increase your max health, your sub-weapon ammunition, your defense, and your attack. In the levels themselves, you can also pick up hearts that refill one character's health. Flasks, which refills your sub-weapon ammunition, new sub-weapons, as well as score bags and extra lives. Sub-weapons drops from purple lanterns, while everything else drops from walls, enemies and orange lanterns. With the exception of green lanterns, that drops Albert's ultimate alchemy sub-weapon. On another side note, sub-weapons do carry over when you switch characters. So, say that you use the fire shield while playing with Albert, and you switch characters, then the character you switch to will have the fire shield activated until it runs out. Stage 1 has you starting out in a forest leading up to a building with a gorgeous 8-bit train traveling past you. At the entrance you find a pathway that you cannot reach, and you won't be able to either as it's not accessible the first time you play the game. Inside you will recognize the level design from the first Castlevania game, as it's the same with the exception of a hidden area I found by damage boosting. Here the similarities end as far as I noticed. You can also find tutorial signs you can read and learn the controls of the game. The building turned out to be a train station as you reach a train at the end. Then, the level have you walking inside and outside the train respectively. Outside you can see a huge castle alongside a crescent moon in the background. Once walking down, you find yourself in front of a door that takes you outside to the game's first boss, that shows its hand before ever reaching the boss room. What a great boss opening. The boss is some kind of mechanical golem on top of the train's furnace. He grabs coal with his hand, trying to push you inside the furnace to burn you. By jumping on top of the coal, you can attack its head. Once defeated, it will grab more coal, but this time the furnace will shoot a huge fire laser alongside fire bolts. Every boss has a final desperation attack, and if you die against it, you'll have to redo the boss fight. Beating the level will give you a chance to recruit Miriam. Recruiting characters is optional by talking to them. If you want to do a Sengetsu only run, you can either just leave the new character behind or kill it for a new power-up. Note that the game becomes significantly more difficult this way. Next stage makes you start next to a huge mountain where you traverse further through the mountainside until you reach a cave that you have to traverse through. Going down gives you a choice to continue down or choose the faster, easier route by going right. Then you go through a river with frogs jumping up to attack you. This route makes you jump over platforms with flower demons blocking your way. After that, you go through another cave up until you reach a platform that takes you past a huge pit. Continuing onwards brings you to a hallway with archer enemies that shoot barrages of arrows towards you. Then the frigid part of the level begins with an ice cave with ice golems. Here you will also find the very first level upgrade, which only Miriam can reach. Continuing downwards from here bring you to the final hallway before you reach the end of the cave, where the boss awaits. The boss is a huge turtle demon that is best fought against as Miriam. It will attack you using small water orbs as a turret. Slide here to reach the boss to attack. Then stalactites will fall from the ceiling. Use the stalactites to jump over the boss's charge attack. Then it will toss rocks from the ceiling until arriving right above you. Sliding with Miriam here is the easiest way to avoid it. Then it will spin around throughout the room while you avoid it. Then it summons a spinning shield of water orbs which can be destroyed as it floats around the boss room. Killing it will make the boss charge straight into the wall towards you, killing itself in the process. Then you can recruit Alfred if you like. Stage 3 takes place inside a sand-filled pyramid, but the sand has a gold paint to it. Here we'll have to go through sinking sand while avoiding spiked ceilings. You'll also run into enemies, shooting a barrage of arrows that the fire shield will be able to fix. You also fight against rock golems that creates shock sways in the ground. Rats and bats were common enemies in this stage as well. The rats especially like to show up during the quicksand section of the level. Another enemy that showed up were the mimic chests. This level also had a breakable wall that hid a 1-up from the player. The level also had a lake of lava with fireballs popping up trying to hurt you from below. The level ends with you traversing a staircase down into the void where the boss awaits. A huge machine-like figure that attacks by pushing a huge pile of coins towards you with his hands. Using them to create platforms made it possible to attack the boss. It then proceeds by combining its two hands, slamming it in the ground, creating a shockwave launching you into the sky for an extra chance to attack. As well as summoning enemies of the 2 waves of gold. Its desperation attack had it launch a rain of gold coins you had to avoid as the screen turned white. Here you can choose to recruit Gavel. Stage 4 is a tower bridge that looks beautiful. The early section also has a half moon in the background. Something to note is that the moon gets fuller and fuller with each level you pass. Eventually you get to a huge pit that only Gavel can pass by transforming into a bat. Gavel was really useful in this level, attacking enemies from below. Overall the tower climb was enjoyable, and I've always been a sucker for these kind of levels. So not only do you climb on the outside of the tower, but inside the apexes as well. You eventually run into a fire golem you are supposed to freeze with Alfred's ice alchemy. You can fly over it with Gavel though. Doing this takes you to a bridge with a bird dropping frogs at you. Go Frog Squad, destroy the heroes! Oh no, a fire shield, their only weakness! We then enter another beautiful apex that leads to the final tower, leading up to the boss fight within the bell tower. Now that I think about it, it is probably a church's bell tower. On top of the tower, we encounter a boss which has a twin-headed dragon. It attacks by either trying to bite you with its lower head or shooting exploding orbs with its top head, and once in a while trying to blast you with a huge fire breath. After killing both heads, the boss turns around and combines both heads into one with several mouths trying to eat you from below, while trying to blast you with a fire beam. Enjoyable fight to say the very least. This boss for some reason had no desperation attack. This level takes place on a ship, or in its interior rather. This level reminds me a bit of the ghost ship level of Castlevania 3 and the ship level from Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Here you had huge gaps for Gavel to pass, as well as floating 1-up in a secret passage. Eventually you get outside the ship's interior and on top of the deck. Here it's raining a lot before you return back into the ship's interior again. This level is the first level that has a mid-boss in it. A floating painting of a pretty blood-crying lady. This mid-boss was rather easy with the fire shield active. Using a small crack in the wall after a mid-boss, you could skip quite a bit of the level's exterior. Then it's back to the outside, where the rain is still going strong, but with the wind pushing you back. Here, you start traversing the masts of the ship with huge chunks missing, making for some dangerous pitfalls. At the top of the mast is where the boss of the level awaits you. The boss for this fight was some kind of weird thunderbird skeleton that flew around in the sky trying to attack you with lightning strikes. Its desperation attack had it stay on top of the mast, cutting it in half, creating lightning on the sides and a huge lightning blast in the middle, before vaporizing, leaving you up there all alone with the moon becoming fuller and the castle in the background. At this point of the game, all levels takes place in the castle. With the moon almost being completely full. This level had lava streams, which were possible to freeze with the ice alchemy. With the name of the level, I'd assume the level takes place in some kind of dungeon or torture chamber, considering all the cages, tools and blood throughout this level. You even had spiked wheels around some surfaces acting as obstacles. Funny enough, Sisterman made a cameo in this level, but perhaps not as scary as he was in Clock Tower. Here, you had to watch out for lava as well, as it killed you instantaneously. Okay, this level is definitely a torture chamber, with all the Iron Maidens hanging in the ceiling. For some reason, this level also had bunny demons trying to kill you with their seductiveness, I guess. After leaving the torture chamber, you end up behind several iron bars blocking the windows, leading up to the door reaching the boss fight. Ironically, I never realized that this was the boss room until after the boss was defeated. I thought it was a mid-boss thanks to the previous level. Anyhow, you have what clearly resembles Camilla, the Blood Countess, as she lies in a bathtub of blood before creating a blood tornado, while dressing herself in an umbrella-looking crimson dress. In this fight, you had to stop her umbrellas that acted like platforms to avoid the spikes she conjured on the floor, as well as the orbs of magic she attacked with. Her desperation attack was to create the bloodnado as well as going back and forth in the room, before transforming into a demon skull, charging towards you, crashing into the wall, exploding. Should have used the Donald Blade instead. The moon getting almost full as well as turning bright yellow have you start climbing the castle throughout a library in order to reach the top with axe throwing enemies and moving platforms. Here, you also end up fighting against possessed books. I guess knowledge can kill? Getting further up to the level introduces disappearing and reappearing books in orange and blue. I didn't have none of that as they introduced pitfalls below and I just flew past it. I've had enough of this from games like Mega Man. Then it was back on top of the castle walls as you climb even higher. The level also introduces conveyor belts that you would later put on top of pits, making you slowly go towards them. Then it was a mid-boss time again, against another painting of a Western gentleman. It also died easy. Then it was back into the library with huge pitfalls and moving platforms again. This had some tricky sections where it was better to use any character but Miriam, thanks to her higher jump, making it more difficult to land on the platforms. Up until the lifts turned further away from each other, of course. Then they decided it was a good idea to have the orange and blue book platforms again before climbing towards the top of the tower, and inside the master library where a strange lizard demon decides to be the boss. In this boss fight, he creates blue book platforms while shocking the entire room, before destroying all platforms as well as shooting bouncing orbs. After that the lightning disappears and the boss shoots lightning through its tail. The desperation attack had it summoning more platforms while targeting the final platform, while splitting itself into 4 forms, then charging into the middle, blowing itself up. Yep, the final level has the title of the game and also one mechanic of the game where you can use the curse of the moon, traveling backwards or doing previous stages. Doing this, however, makes you lose all your progress, not carrying anything over but your total game time. Anyhow, the level starts out in a hallway with hanging chandeliers, but before you know it, a stream of darkness starts moving, destroying the surrounding area it touches. Here, you gotta be quick or use Albert's fire shield, which makes you invincible against it. Then, it's time to climb the stairs down as quickly as you can. Then you get to a hallway to breathe in before entering what looks like a temple. Here you can use the fire shield to reach a shortcut. Using the shortcut takes you to another hallway with 2 wolf riders. Climbing the staircase takes you to a purple hallway where you will have to run from the stream of darkness again. Intense is a great way to describe this level. You have to be quick here as the platforms are destroyed behind you. At the end you can go down some stairs or fly towards the shortcut with Gabble. Next up is climbing the tower with the darkness chasing after you until the next set of stairs takes you to the bridge outside with the full moon in full shine. Then you have birds dropping frogs at you before you reach the boss door taking you to the final boss. You can pick up Arthur's ultimate alchemy in the final hallway that takes you to the final boss, as well as some refills preparing you for the final boss. Once you reach the end of this hallway, you encounter a set of platforms while the game shows the window. Now you fight against the final boss, a winged demon with the streams of darkness led by Donald Blade attacking you. Killing this form takes you to an elevator automatically, which takes you on top of the tower where the winged demon has evolved. This is a true final boss of the game. It uses the different phases of the moon to create different moon sickles that it uses to attack you with in different patterns depending on the moon. Some homing in on you while others attack in a set path. When the full moon arrives, it summons giant-eyed spears that try to strike you. Destroying the eyes will create platforms that will help you reach the boss to attack, as well as lanterns that will refill your sub-weapons. While you try to attack the boss, it will shoot laser beams towards you as well. As the final boss comes closer to death, it will create a balls of magic, attacking the sides of the tower, while it creates a huge blood moon that it throws onto the tower, creating a huge fire pillar in the middle, with only the sides free from harm. The final boss's desperation attack turned into the purple moon that it launched at the gang. If you have rescued all the characters, Sengetsu will sacrifice himself in order to save his companions. Thus, the final story text scrolls with builds up the new mode unlocked known as Nightmare. There are 3 different game modes you can play, with 2 of them having to be unlocked. This review does not cover the rest. So, is this game worth getting? Yes, definitely. Especially if you like the old era NES games that this game draws inspiration from. The graphics are beautifully done with an 8-bit style, and the music is absolutely fantastic. So short and short, this game is great and offers replayability, and mastering this is sure to be a blast. Especially for the price of the game, which is only €9.99 euros. Definitely well spent money for the time you are likely to sink into this game. If you're a fan of Castlevania, this is a game for you. Hello everybody, thank you very much for watching this review of Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. I hope you enjoyed it. Then again, if you got this far, I'm sure you did. So, a special thanks to Hikikomori Media for your $1 pledge, and Patrick Peterson for your $5 pledge. Your support is what makes these kind of videos happen, so you know, for others, go down in the description, press that link to Patreon and support me if you want to. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I shall see you next video. Bye for now!